Ace Podcast.
Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of Vaguely Accurate. I'm your host DK, and today on the show we'll be learning a little from the field of herpetology and zoology in the form of frogs. To teach us about this is Josh from the University of Western Australia, who has just completed his honours. He is also a huge reptilian fan, I suppose, and grows his own reptiles and incubates them from birth and everything, which is quite fascinating. So we'll get into that. And as always, if you have anything you would wish to share with us or want to get in contact to feature on the show, you can email us at vaguecomments@gmail.com, or you can visit our website, www.vaguelyaccurate.com, and tell us what you have to say. Cheers, guys. Let's get into it.
Righto. My name's Josh, and I studied zoology and conservation biology as my undergrad, two majors at UWA for 2013 to 2016. Mm-hmm. And in this year, I conducted an honours project at UWA as well, monitoring frogs on the Swan Coastal Plain. Yeah, all finished.
All finished. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
So what is zoology? Can you tell us first off?
Zoology, I think like the general description would be just the study of animals. Mm-hmm. But obviously you can branch off into tons of different aspects of zoology. You've got the physiology, which is, how things function. Mm-hmm. Ecology, which is sort of branches with like a few other sort of categories like botany and, like environmental science.
Yeah.
But it's how animals interact with, plants and like the weather, their environment, so to speak.
Yep.
So I'd say it's probably those two are probably the two broadest like categories of zoology.
And where do you fit into this?
Well, I did more of an ecology thing.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I won't forget the geneticists because their work's really important as well.
Yeah.
But so I did more of the ecology aspect for my honours.
Okay.
Which was basically how frogs interacted with their environment, like where they'd be and the like functions they'd undertake, behaviours and such.
Yeah.
The project in general was trying to figure out where frogs were in different wetlands, the characteristics of these. So, whether there'd be roads, vegetation types, the type of like hydrology. So whether it was like a seasonal or a permanent wetland, like a damp land or like a permanent lake. And then obviously one of the most fundamental questions when anyone's undertaking like animal monitoring is the animal truly there? Because obviously you can go to a site on one day and you'll see tons of different, see your target species again and again and again. But if you go on when conditions aren't conducive to spotting the animal, then you're going to get skewed results if these conditions aren't the same over continuous monitoring like efforts. Mm-hmm. So mine was essentially trying to overcome that to figure out like an unbiased way of determining whether frogs were going to be present or absent at a particular area.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, well, it's relatively new in Western Australia.
Yeah.
America's been doing it for God knows how long. Eastern states sort of. It's really resurrected about 2002, I believe. It's specifically called occupancy modelling is the statistical approach I did. But yeah, no, very, very few people in Western Australia know how to actually or use it at all, which makes learning it quite difficult.
When you say frog species, are you looking at a particular species of frog, or are you kind of just using that as an umbrella term for all?
Yeah, so this was a deductive study. So we went to these wetlands to figure out what frog species would be present. Obviously, we had a general idea because like within 2 years previously, the city of Rockingham, which is where my study was conducted in, which is about 40 k's south of Perth. Mm-hmm. That's got quite a lot of wetlands and such. There'd been ongoing frog monitoring. That's how I actually got the project, was because a company called Bioenvironmental Sciences were contracted by the city of Rockingham to undertake frog monitoring because obviously with climate change, etc., wetlands are changing quite a lot. So they want to figure out, all right, what frogs do we have here? Can we establish a threshold for action? So if we can determine like if frog populations are going down, can we implement action at like frog populations have gone down 20% within, 2 years. Do we need to start, doing some conservation actions, put some money into it before it gets too late?
So how did you come about this project? It's best way to term it, I suppose, it's like a pioneering study, I suppose. It's
the pilot study.
That's the term I'm looking for.
Well, I mean, I really just sort of stumbled into this project because two of the people from Biota came into my work one day and just started talking about how zoologists don't have jobs. But they were like, look, I was like, I'm in Rockingham. If you have any volunteering, hit me up. And funnily enough, they had this project in a month or two that they were going to do. So I went out and helped them. Talking to them, they're like, yeah, look, we're actually thinking of doing an honours project, which is like scales beyond the size of what they were doing at the time. And so I was like, all right, just get the grades and it's yours. So I was like, sweet. And I thought it was one of the more interesting projects on offer for this year.
Yeah.
I mean, physiology, I don't really care about the renal function of like some squid or something, I mean, like, don't get me wrong. I don't diss people that do. It's just not what gets my gears turning,
That's very specific. Like
there is, trust me. I mean, fiddler crab's eyesight. Like I got friends doing that. And I was like, wow. I guess they're both kind of tough sells, but obviously mine is, frogs are, I guess, an iconic species.
Yeah.
Well, they're not. Like they're an iconic group. You hear them. Everyone hears frogs if you go out. Whereas no one really sees the relevance of fiddler crab eyesight or whatever. But there is. Because they did explain that, but it's not immediately apparent. But ecology, it's more what I wanted to do. I like the idea of doing fauna surveys, etc. So it let me go outdoors, learn a ton of different statistical programs, geospatial analysis, etc.
Develop a large skill set.
Yeah, definitely. That's
important.
One thing I would recommend if anyone's looking at doing an honours project is pick one that you want to, like a career path that you want to do. So
I agree.
Like one of your last people looked at doing conservation offsets for Carnaby's cockatoos. If you want to do that, then maybe you want to be a policy maker for DPAW. That's like a really good innings. Whereas mine, I wanted to do fauna surveying for Biota, etc.
Yeah, and it's really important to mention while we're on it is most jobs, especially as they're so scarce at the moment, most industry-based jobs do involve heavy field work in some respect, especially when it comes to ecology, conservation, and zoology, those kind of fields.
Yeah.
So it's important if you get the opportunity, I suppose, speculate that your employment possibilities and chances increase significantly if you have a field background. So you can say, that's how I got my job. Like I did a field honours project and they appreciated the fact that I had a skill set that they could utilise.
For sure. Just stay well-rounded,
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if any of our listeners have never heard of a motorbike frog, but they are incredible.
I'll play it on my phone.
Yeah, do get one.
That's like one of the funniest things about my project is I downloaded a Frogs of Swan Coastal Plain CD. So because I had to learn the different frog calls. So when I'm playing my like iPhone at work or something on the Bluetooth, they're just like, why is there like frogs calling?
That's really cool. Like I heard them the other day. I genuinely thought they were a motorbike. It's so realistic. It's incredible.
Here we go. It's just like gears changing, Enough of that. I'm sick of them.
Enough of that. You're probably done and dusted with those guys.
Oh, nah, but we'll talk about that later.
So the project title you had...
I'll try and remember it off in my head, but I believe it was Occupancy Modelling Neurons in Wetlands on the Swan Coastal Plain.
That's a lot of words.
It was quite... you should have heard it before.
So what was your methodology that you took to measure this? Like you were looking into pretty much creating a baseline ecological assessment. Rather than a study of it, you're looking at devising an assessment tool that others can use.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, mine wasn't specifically... Obviously, when you undertake like long-term monitoring, it takes, multiple years, generation lengths of the animals you're monitoring. Mine's sort of a setup for that, which is why Biota wanted me to do it in Rockingham, because... essentially they could improve their own monitoring of those populations. And then there's been some work of maybe Kwinana's going to pick it up as well. But anyone that wants to do monitoring in the Swan Coastal Plain can use my work to sort of improve it if they wanted to. But essentially, I think that first problem I posed was if you go to a site and, you can't detect the species, but, it's there, what do? So essentially this modelling program is called occupancy modelling, and it sort of breaks down your surveys into detectability, which is the probability that if your species is present at the site that you visit during your survey, like what is the chance that you'll actually detect it? And then occupancy, which refers to the probability that the species is actually at your site. You have a bunch of factors. You do a lot of research on your species. You figure out the things that influence its detection. So you can confer detection by tons of different methods. It depends on the taxonomic group that you're working with. For, birds, you can do calls. Even honky nut bites, because lots of different parrots have different beak shapes, etc. You can actually pick.
That's an odd specialist to have.
It's very weird. But essentially, you only need one sort of influence of detection, because you either do it 1 or 0. So if you detect the species, that survey a 1, or you give it a 0. So for frogs, the most simple way is just learning their calls, because all frogs have specific calls. In the Swan Coastal Plain, they're all pretty distinctive. So essentially, I would detect the call, and then you do multiple surveys to sort of create these detection histories, which will be like a 1-0, 1-1-0, depending on how many surveys you undertook.
And how long does a survey take? Is there a survey given a temporal scale? So you sit in a chair in the middle of this wetlands and go, cool, that was 3 calls in 10 minutes. That's one survey. And then you do another one? Or
well, thankfully, I didn't actually have to go out there myself. Well, I did, but I didn't have to go out there at 3 a.m. in the morning, which I actually did record. I used a lot of monitoring equipment. So we had portable weather stations. Because frogs are ectotherms, which I don't know if people know, but ectotherms are species that don't control their body temperature through metabolism.
The term cold-blooded is where that derives from, right?
Exactly. So temperature, like environmental factors such as that, really have a big effect on their behaviour. So for breeding frogs, a lot of literature has found temperature to be a big influence, humidity as well, because frogs they've got porous skin, so when you have high atmospheric moisture, they lose less moisture to the environment.
So they're more likely to be around during high humid, warmer nights? Yeah,
they're more likely to call in the literature. I won't give the game away yet about what I found. But essentially, we used portable weather monitoring stations for that. And then we put microphones at different sites as well. So I take 4 or 5 minute samples from a night. So it was 9 p.m, 11 p.m, 1 a.m, 3 a.m. I'd listen for 5 minutes. If I could hear whatever species I heard, I'd give it either a 1 or a 0. It was 12 surveys from 3 separate nights, spaced about 3 weeks apart. I took 4 per night. So we could sort of determine whether time had an effect as well throughout the night. So because some species have shown to call earlier or later in the evening.
So to summarise that a little bit, so you've got the Swan Coastal Plain and you've set up some microphones around the place. You've got weather stations to get the data of the current state of the weather. You got 4 samples throughout the night at 5-minute intervals, and you've just determined yes or no whether you heard the call of a species of frog in that area, I suppose.
And then essentially to figure out occupancy, so whether the species is present or not, I just did a lot of research into the factors that would influence them. So vegetation is a big influencing factor. So I had to sort of classify it as like emergent vegetation, which is the vegetation that's in the water or like sort of sticks up, or reeds, which is, stuff that's over like a metre tall. There's a few different species. Influence of roads, because roads have like a big impact on direct mortality for some species. As well as the noise can influence, whether they'll be present, because they have to compete with cars for noise to be able to be heard by a female.
Is that pretty much the sole purpose of their calling, is just a mating call? That's pretty much all it's used for? Or is it got alternative uses?
I think there is a few different reasons they do call, but just for the sake of mine, it was for mating.
It sounds like a stupid trivia fact, but I'd be interested to know what motorbike most sounds like the ideal female mating call. See if you can relate it to do motorbike frogs that sound more like a Harley Davidson? Do they kind of pick up more females, or is it like more of a lesser known bike or a Ninja or something like that? It'd be a pointless study, I can imagine, but
Or
It would be interesting.
You get like a little Vespa frog.
Yeah.
It's not attracting anyone.
Little putt kind of machine.
But yeah, I think as far as it's like directly correlated to obviously noise. So the louder you are, the more likely you are to attract a mate. But some males will be sneaky. I'm not sure if this relates to Morai, but some males will just sit next to really loud males and they're just like sneak in. The male will get an amplexus, which is when it grips the female, and then she lays the eggs and he fertilizes, and then you get another male on top of that male. And we got a photo of like 5 males attached to one female, and they're all just like a conga line. Oh,
That's
so
amazing.
Can
you send that to me?
Yeah, it was so funny.
That'll be on the website. You've definitely got to check that one out. That's going to be amazing.
Oh, it was disgusting. Yeah. So, but whatever, hedonistic, live and let live.
All nature has its own intentions.
That's it.
Exactly. So I'll take a little segue. So we've got a nice understanding of how your approach went. What did you find? And leading on from that, what was the impact of what you found?
Righto. So breaking it down into what we found about detection and occupancy, the factors that most influence detection for just about all species which had the same influence was rainfall. I only managed to have enough data to record 4 species, to model 4 species, which were 2 species of Crinia, which are like a pretty small species, maybe the size of your thumbnail.
Oh, wow.
So Crinia glautii, Crinia insignifera, Latoria adelaidensis, which is the slender tree frog. Not very large at all, maybe the size like up to your first knuckle of your pinky finger.
Wow, there are a lot of species of frogs that are tiny. Yeah. I've always got this intention that maybe like a palm size was like a traditional frog size.
Yeah, well, we did get that. And the banjo, so I'm not sure if anyone knows what the banjo is, but it makes a song like a banjo frog. Like an actual banjo, like a da-da-ding-ding-ding, not like that. But, no.
I'm beginning to appreciate frogs more and more throughout this.
It really suited
incredible.
Rockingham. But, here we go. I got it here because it's such an iconic one. So it's like a plucking. So we got them as well. And across all 4 species, rainfall had a positive influence, which coincides with a lot of the literature.
Yeah.
More environmental water means more chances to reproduce because a lot of these, 3 out of the 4 species can breed in shallow seasonal water bodies. And it relates to the duration of metamorphosis. So from becoming an egg to a frog that can emerge from the water with legs, it takes different times. So for Crinia insignifera, I think the minimum time has been recorded about 40 days or 45 days. Okay. Whereas for banjo frogs, it can take up to about 160 days.
That's a long time, especially in I suppose, like you just said, a seasonally dependent water body, like especially in Australia, where, I don't know, what season did you do yours? I could assume winter, maybe?
So from June till August.
Okay,
August.
So you got like a nice rainfall period.
Yeah, middle of winter breeding species.
Yeah, so they don't breed during this, well, there's very limited water body about. So.
Yeah, well, the species breed for different lengths of the year as well. Some only breed for 2-3 months. Some will breed for 9 months.
Yeah,
I think there's a couple that breed all year round. They're just opportunistic. So basically, the rainfall indicated that these small seasonally breeding frogs that develop very quickly can have great opportunity to reproduce, so they breed. Whereas a large one, it might be like an influshing of fresh water into lakes, etc. That they still require permanent, but it might also facilitate female movement from outside areas into wetlands. And then, funnily enough, temperature wasn't a top factoring variable that influenced detection. So basically, how occupancy modeling works is it'll make every single combination of the factors that you recorded and rank them in a line. It was significant, but it was very, very minimal. It increased the probability of detection by 5% or something.
Which is a lot less, especially for, you just said, an exothermic.
Yeah. So the difference between going out there and trying to listen to a frog when it's not raining is about 40%, but it goes up to about 70 or so when it is raining, which is,
significant.
Yeah, and obviously if you're a company looking at trying to, reduce your costs of doing surveys, because this way you can essentially reduce the surveys to only go when you're likely to detect them.
Yep.
You go out when it's raining. That's where you can save money.
So pretty much from what you've found, you put all the data you have meteorologically and also detection purposely into this model, and it produced probability of detection based on each scenario you get based on its high temperatures or weather conditions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And using this data, you are able to produce a baseline demographic for when frog species are likely to occur, and companies can use this.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much nailed it on the head, really. So that was detection, rainfall, humidity had a decreasing effect on detection, which was extremely counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Because obviously you think high humidity, you get more calling. But it just sort of goes to show that, even though there is a direct relationship between how it affects the frogs, there might be something else going on. Like, because these frogs pretty much all call from the water, decreasing humidity doesn't affect them because they're in the water.
I mean, at the same time, when rain occurs, it's,
exactly.
High humidity.
It's just sort of like something else is going on that we sort of could do a bit more research into.
Yeah.
Or try and get a greater understanding of. My project was more like, it's on species that are quite common in like Western Australia, well, Swan Coastal Plain. They're pretty much everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But no one's really done any research on them.
Kind of taken for granted almost.
Yeah. And I mean, there is evidence of them declining, obviously, with all the Belia, is it Belia Drive? Or Row 8 extensions?
The Row 8 extension going through the Belia coast, the Belia wetplains or the Belia wetlands.
So, I mean, obviously that's going to impact frogs directly in that they don't have habitat anymore, but we don't know how much.
There's been no baseline study to determine how important that ecosystem is or that environment is.
Pretty much. There's, it's up to the councils to conduct their own sort of research on it, or if they do want to manage the populations.
Yeah.
It's not something DPAW has been involved with as far as I'm aware.
Mm-hmm.
But this one in Rockingham is one of the I think this was year 3, and I mean that was one of the longest ongoing monitoring efforts of frogs in the Swan Coastal Plain that I've found.
Yeah.
Which is a bit scary. I'm sure a lot of councils will pick it up, hopefully, because wetlands are so important in this area.
Incredible, like just anywhere that's going to hold a constant year-round body of water.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Australia is just by default is going to be important.
Yeah, they're hugely important. So it's really important and frogs are a really major aspect of wetlands because they act as a bridge between aquatic and terrestrial life cycles, because they have that multi-stage life cycle where as tadpoles they're obviously in the water, so they can act as detritivores. And then once they turn into adults, they can transition between the two and sort of, they prey for a lot of things and they're predators. But obviously climate change in the Swan Coastal Plain is hugely impacting wetlands hydrology. So
Explain more about that.
Right. So, I mean, if anyone is not aware, the Swan Coastal Plain is undergoing increasing temperatures, decreasing rainfall, lower periods of rainfall, and higher evaporation, etc. So a lot of these wetlands are turning from permanent to seasonal.
That's not good.
No. The western swamp turtle is a good example because that's a species that relies on seasonal wetland inundation. So they'll estivate, which is basically they'll go underground and sleep through summer, the hottest part of summer. Start of winter, when there's a bit of rain, they'll come back up, eat, grow, etc. And then they'll go back down. But if they don't get this period where they can eat and fatten up, etc., they're not able to breed. They're basically just staying stable, but they're not breeding.
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of energy for them to breed. And with frogs, because everything is so urbanized now, the frogs like dorsalis that require, really long periods of permanent water to be able to properly metamorphose, they're losing, the water's drying out faster than they can develop. So essentially they're not actually able to, repopulate the population.
Are there anything that frogs themselves give towards an ecosystem? Do they provide an ecosystem service?
Yeah. They transition biomass between aquatic and terrestrial habitats because, they, like I said, they're predators and prey for a lot of species. They're sort of that intermediate trophic level. Mm-hmm. So a lot of things, eat them, and they eat a lot of things as well.
Yeah.
So that's quite important.
Yeah, I'd say so, especially, I don't know the studies, but I know there have been some significant studies where if you just take away one aspect of a food chain, the abundance and diversity of any species that directly or indirectly is reliant upon that in some way.
A trophic cascade.
A trophic cascade.
I believe it's called.
That is perfect. So what's next for you?
Oh, yeah. So when you mentioned Latoria morai before, I've been asked to conduct a project on Mycosis prevalence in Latoria morai on the Swan Coastal Plain. So for those that aren't aware, Mycosis is a disease caused by a fungus.
Okay.
Citridium something or other. I shouldn't try to say it because it's quite long and complicated. But it's a disease that's been affecting frogs all over the world, and they want to figure out like how prevalent it is on the Swan Coastal Plain in our species. And I mean, one of the leading researchers in Western Australia, Dale Roberts on frogs, he has some pretty interesting views about like its prevalence and whether it's actually affecting species here or not. Because I think off the top of my head, when he talked to me about it, it was because we're quite salty wetlands being on the coastal plain, the fungus can't propagate as well on frogs.
That seems lucky for them.
Yeah, well, I mean, this will be like he did a study back in, I think, 1998, but this will be quite thorough, sort of where it is. And it's using similar techniques to what I did, occupancy modelling, etc. But we'll see.
Sounds exciting to find out, like pioneer some kind of research in that.
Yeah, it's a really important thing to try and determine, because it has pretty much, in the eastern states, it's pretty much wiped out whole populations of frogs.
Wow.
Yeah, and in America, so many are just like completely just decimated because you'll get this initial wave of the fungus affecting water bodies, and then it'll just like kill 99% of the population.
Are there any methods to curate the effect of a fungus in an ecosystem? Yeah,
so they have found a few methods of controlling it. One is quite complex, like it's long term, keep them well heated and stuff. I think there's a really cool project a friend went to in South America where they just went out into they lived in shipping containers for I think they're just permanently set up there now, but they just go out and collect these frogs and they just keep them safe and keep them quarantined, etc., because it's just wiping out tons of these endangered frog species.
So they've created a refuge.
Yeah, well, like an insurance population, essentially. Okay. So once the fungal has gone through, I guess they'll try and reintroduce it. Yeah. But like a lot of frogs have actually sort of developed a bit of a resistance to it.
That's good.
Which is good, but obviously, if you've only got a couple hundred frog individuals left of this species and you lose 99% of them, it can have a lot of ongoing effects. Like it might introduce, deleterious sort of genetics into the population.
Yeah.
So we'll all look like inbred frogs. Well, they'll all look like inbred frogs with,
proper free.
Yeah.
So do you think you're going to take that approach?
Maybe. I'm thinking about it.
Kind of still in the debating stage of what you want.
Yeah, it's been a long 4 years.
Good point. Maybe a break.
Yeah, I'm definitely keen on helping the guy out. But regardless if I do it or not, it'll still get done because there's quite a few people in the University of Melbourne that have put their hand up to do it.
Yeah.
But hopefully Biota with their project in Rockingham has significantly improved. And I actually had to find a lot more wetlands when I did this because we chose 9 instead of the original 5. Like on top of that, we chose 4 more. So I had to contact quite a few private landholders and organisations, one of which is West Australian Bird Group. They were super useful and they loved the data. They frothed it. They were like, yes, tell us more. Help, we want more frogs. And it's good to see that there's like these private organisations
out there doing
conservation work, because they actually, I was super stoked that they were so keen on it.
On that, I like to end each episode with the guest advocating or delivering a take-home message to any of the audience or listeners out there, something they can maybe apply or something they can just ponder. Do you happen to have any messages that you can send to our listeners?
It would probably try and be more frog-friendly. When fertilising your lawn, don't overdo it, or don't do it just before rainfall or after rainfall, etc., because it has huge effects on polluting the water bodies. And now that we're not getting as much rainfall, it just stagnates and causes these massive algal blooms, which not only affect frogs, it affects, like all the fish, etc. They lose all the oxygen in the water and they die. But also, try have a frog-friendly garden.
Yeah.
You can do that pretty, 40 morai living in our backyard, because we just have self-watering pots, which have like a little water reservoir at the bottom and they just live in that.
I have to ask with that, how would you propose doing that, but also not getting a mosquito breeding ground?
There's a few conflicting things, but generally frogs don't control mosquitoes.
Okay.
But essentially, if you have tadpoles in a water body, they will compete with larvae for nutrients, etc. So it'll essentially decrease the amount of mosquitoes you get breeding.
Yeah.
And if there's, plants, etc., or you have like a really simple filter, you're not going to get mosquitoes growing in there because they like stagnant water.
Okay, that's really good to know because we've had water bodies, little kind of bird feeding and water bodies around here, and this house just gets absolutely swarmed with mosquitoes. I'm not too sure why, but
it's really bad, and it's that stagnation of water because we're not getting that flushing continuously from rainfall. That first flush we get in winter will just bring all the chemicals and stuff on the road into the water, and it will just make it gross, and you'll lose all the wildlife in that water body, and it obviously just has like knock-on effects.
And a localized annual catastrophe for...
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone sees the algal blooms in the Swan River.
Yes. They're impressive to see, but when you actually know what they are, they're nasty.
Yeah, it's a bit sad.
Anyway, I suppose we'll finish it there, but thank you very much for coming on the show. It's great to have you.
Dan.
I'd like to thank you guys as the listeners out there for tuning into Vaguely Accurate. It's you guys that keeps us going. I hope you guys all learned something new from hearing my discussion with Josh. I know I really certainly gained a new appreciation of frogs. And if anyone would like to start a discussion or has any questions, then please feel free to email me or start a discussion on any of our social media sites. And it'll be good to hear from you. Anyway, that's it from us for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. And as always, check out our website.